Picture this. You're a government trade envoy. You fancy a little holiday to Cyprus, snap a few photos under some flags, shake some hands with local politicians, and boom, suddenly you're out of a job faster than a Tory MP changing their leadership vote. Welcome back to UK Pancakes, where British politics serves up more drama than a soap opera, and today we're diving into the absolutely bonkers story of how Afzal Khan managed to get himself fired by Sir Keir Starmer for what he claimed was just a personal visit to northern Cyprus. Spoiler alert, it wasn't just any personal visit, and it definitely wasn't personal by the time the diplomatic fallout was done. Now, before we get into this magnificent mess, let me paint you a picture of international diplomacy. Imagine it's like a very posh dinner party where everyone's pretending to like each other, but there are unspoken rules about where you can sit, who you can talk to, and absolutely under no circumstances can you acknowledge your mate Dave who crashed the party and is sitting at the kids' table claiming he owns a house. Northern Cyprus is essentially Dave in this scenario, except Dave has been claiming he owns half the house since 1974, and only Turkey thinks he's got a point. So here's where our story begins to get properly mental. Afzal Khan, Labour MP for Manchester Rusholme, and until very recently the UK's trade envoy to Turkey, decided to pop over to northern Cyprus for what he insisted was a purely personal visit. Nothing official about it, just a casual trip to meet with Asen Tata, who happens to be the leader of a territory that literally nobody except Turkey recognizes as a legitimate state. It's like claiming you're just popping round to your mate's house when your mate happens to be squatting in someone else's property and has changed all the locks. But here's where Khan really stepped in it, and I mean proper face first into a diplomatic cowpat. He didn't just have a quiet coffee with Tata. Oh no, that would have been too sensible. Instead, he rocked up to Tata's official residence, posed or photographed beneath the northern Cyprus flag like he was on some sort of diplomatic victory tour, and basically gave the international equivalent of 2 fingers to every UN resolution that's ever been written about Cyprus. It's the kind of move that makes you wonder if Khan confused trade envoy with freelance diplomat with absolutely no understanding of international law. Now, let's talk about why this is such a big deal. Because if you're thinking it's just a flag and a photo, you're missing the spectacular geopolitical earthquake Khan just triggered. Cyprus has been divided since 1974 when Turkey invaded the north, and the international community, including the UK, has spent nearly 5 decades refusing to recognize northern Cyprus as anything other than occupied territory. It's not just a political stance. It's enshrined in UN resolutions that basically say, no, Turkey, you can't just invade half an island and declare it a new country. When Khan posed for those photos, he wasn't just being a bit cheeky. He was essentially giving a diplomatic middle finger to international law and telling the legitimate government of Cyprus that their sovereignty is optional. The reaction was swift and absolutely brutal. The official Cypriot government in the south went nuclear, diplomatically speaking, of course. They described Khan's actions as absolutely condemnable and unacceptable, which in diplomatic language is basically the equivalent of calling someone a complete muppet while wearing white gloves and speaking very politely. They demanded that UK officials respect their state and the international agreements that exist specifically to prevent exactly this kind of diplomatic disaster. It's like telling someone to respect the do not touch sign after they've already licked the exhibit. But here's where the story gets even more delicious. Sir Keir Starmer's response, or rather, his spectacular lack of one. For 6 whole days after the Daily Mail broke this story, Starmer did absolutely nothing. 6 days. In political terms, that's roughly equivalent to 6 years of letting your house burn down while you debate whether you should call the fire brigade. The pressure kept building. Labour MPs started asking uncomfortable questions. Khan's own constituents were raising eyebrows. And still Starmer sat there like a deer in headlights, apparently hoping the whole thing would just blow over. Meanwhile, the National Federation of Cypriots in the UK was having absolutely none of it. They pointed out, quite reasonably, that no UK official would dream of visiting occupied Ukraine and posing for photos with Russian-installed leaders, so why on earth was Khan's Cyprus adventure any different? It's a comparison that cuts right to the heart of the matter. If we wouldn't legitimize Putin's territorial grabs, why would we legitimize Turkey's? The logic is so obvious it practically slaps you in the face, yet somehow Khan managed to miss it entirely. The Tories, naturally, smelled blood in the water and went into full attack mode. Dame Priti Patel, the the shadow foreign secretary, absolutely tore into Starmer, saying he should have sacked his trade envoy straight away and accusing the Prime Minister of showing poor judgment that undermines Britain's global standing. She's not wrong. When your trade envoy is out there playing diplomatic roulette with international law, you don't wait a week to see how the chips fall. You cut your losses immediately and hope nobody noticed the complete shambles. Conservative MPs branded Starmer spineless for leaving Khan in post for so long, and honestly, it's hard to argue with that assessment. This wasn't a complex political calculation requiring weeks of careful consideration. This was a bloke who'd clearly overstepped his bounds in the most obvious way possible. The fact that it took Starmer a week to reach the blindingly obvious conclusion that Khan had to go doesn't exactly scream decisive leadership. It screams panic mode followed by reluctant damage control. But let's give credit where it's due. Khan's excuse was absolutely priceless. He told officials it was a personal visit, and that ministers were apparently unaware of the trip. Right, because nothing says personal holiday like meeting the leader of a disputed territory in his official residence and posing for formal photographs under government flags. That's like claiming you were just popping to the shops when you accidentally end up giving a speech at the UN General Assembly. The sheer audacity of trying to pass off such an obviously official-looking visit as personal is almost impressive in its complete disconnection from reality. The international implications of this farce can't be understated. The UK has spent decades carefully maintaining its position on Cyprus, supporting the legitimate government while refusing to recognize the Turkish occupation of the north. Khan's little photo op didn't just embarrass the government. It actively undermined decades of consistent foreign policy and gave ammunition to anyone who wants to argue that Britain's commitment to international law is negotiable. It's the kind of diplomatic own goal that foreign policy experts will be citing in textbooks for years to come. What makes this even more extraordinary is the timing. Labour has been desperately trying to rebuild its credibility on foreign policy after years of internal divisions, and here's one of their own envoys basically setting fire to established diplomatic norms for reasons that remain completely unclear. It's like watching someone carefully build a house of cards for months, only to sneeze on it just as they are placing the final piece. The self-inflicted nature of this crisis is almost artistic in its completeness. When Starmer finally did act, it was with all the decisiveness of someone who'd run out of options and hoped nobody would notice the delay. Khan was quietly removed from his position on Friday evening, with a government spokesman offering the most understated statement in political history. Mr. Khan has left his position as trade envoy to the Republic of Turkey. No explanation. No acknowledgement of the diplomatic chaos, just a simple statement that could have been describing someone leaving after a perfectly normal end to their contract rather than being fired for causing an international incident. The National Federation of Cypriots in the UK, meanwhile, was practically doing cartwheels of joy. Their president, Christos Karaolis, thanked the Daily Mail for raising the issue and welcomed Khan's departure, describing his position as clearly untenable following what he called a deeply inappropriate and unacceptable visit. He didn't mince words about the implications either, pointing out that Khan's actions compromised UK foreign policy, undermined the sovereignty of the Republic of Cyprus, and contravened international law. When even pressure groups are giving you a diplomatic masterclass, you know you've really messed up. This whole saga raises serious questions about how government appointments are managed and whether trade envoys fully understand the responsibilities that come with their roles. Khan wasn't some junior official who made an innocent mistake. He was specifically appointed to represent British interests in Turkey, a role that required at least a basic understanding of the region's political sensitivities. The fact that he could so catastrophically misread the situation suggests either a complete failure of briefing or a spectacular case of diplomatic tone deafness. Looking at the broader picture, this incident perfectly encapsulates everything that's wrong with how political appointments sometimes work in modern Britain. You get given a fancy title, probably a nice business card, and suddenly you're representing the country on the international stage, but without the institutional knowledge, diplomatic training, or apparently basic common sense to avoid walking into obvious political minefields. It's like giving someone a Formula One car and being surprised when they crash it into the first corner because nobody mentioned that the brakes are important. The international community will be watching to see how Britain handles the fallout from this mess, particularly other divided territories and occupied regions around the world. If UK envoys can casually legitimize territorial occupations by accident, what does that say about Britain's commitment to international law more broadly? It's exactly the kind of precedent you don't want to set when you're trying to maintain credibility on issues like Ukraine, Kashmir, or any other disputed territory where Britain takes a principled stance. For Starmer personally, this represents a significant early test of his crisis management skills, and frankly, he didn't exactly pass with flying colors. The week-long delay in acting suggests either indecision or hope that the story would disappear, neither of which inspires confidence in his ability to handle the much bigger foreign policy challenges that are inevitably coming down the line. When your response to a diplomatic crisis is to hide under the duvet and hope it goes away, you're probably not ready for the big leagues of international relations. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about this entire fiasco is how avoidable it was. This wasn't some complex diplomatic trap that Khan stumbled into. This was a clearly marked minefield that he decided to tap dance through while wearing steel boots. The rules about Cyprus aren't hidden in obscure UN resolutions that require a legal degree to understand. They are basic, well-established principles of British foreign policy that anyone in Khan's position should have known backwards. The speed with which this all unraveled also tells us something important about how modern political scandals develop. 6 days from the Daily Mail breaking the story to Khan being removed from office. That's lightning fast by traditional political standards. But in our current media environment, it might as well have been 6 months. The pressure builds so quickly now that trying to weather the storm by staying quiet is almost guaranteed to make things worse. So what's the lesson here? Well, if you're a government trade envoy, maybe check with someone before you pop off to disputed territories for personal meetings with unrecognized leaders. And if you're a prime minister, maybe don't wait a week to fire someone who just accidentally undermined decades of your country's foreign policy. But mostly, this story serves as a perfect reminder that in politics, there's always someone willing to turn a simple holiday into an international incident, and there's usually a photographer nearby when they do it. Thanks for watching UK Pancakes, where British politics continues to serve up more surprises in a box of assorted chocolates. You never know what you're going to get, but it's probably going to be messier than you expected. Don't forget to subscribe for more political chaos. And I'll see you in the next one, where we'll probably be discussing whatever spectacular way our politicians have found to embarrass themselves this week.